Hello there, this is Matthew of Luminous Beings Books coming at you with another session of Stray Thoughts. And I am talking about the Axis once again. It's only been a couple hours since I last was talking about this, and I wasn't thinking much about it because there was a lot going on. However, it did cross my mind, and I just wanted to get some things out there. So, here we go, on the Axis. I was thinking about the multiple layers that I want to attack. Oh, you know what? Actually, I was thinking about this the other day, and now it's here. So, one of my conceits in the Axis is basically it's a story. Well, I guess I'll explain the delusion. The delusion that Micah, the Axis, the central character of the story, finds himself in is that basically all of humanity is falling asleep, or has fallen asleep. And the only ones who are still awake are him and not his friends, his allies at first. And kind of slowly gets introduced to them as he goes on to the, within a short time they all meet, but at the beginning, after the incident, he awakens, and so do some other people, and they come into contact with each other. And there's this really neat thing that I found in my studies, that there are four, I guess you would call it in Jewish mystical thought, there are four types or classes of creation. There is and this is funny because it ties to 20 questions. Apparently in 20 questions you can ask, is it a animal, vegetable, or mineral? And there's a similar set of classifications. There's the world of the inanimate, or the mineral. There's the world of the plants, or there's the classification of plants as creations. Then there's animals, and then there's animals who have speech, which are humans. And you can look at, despite the fact that there are chimpanzees and gorillas that can learn sign language, and a dog can learn somewhere around, I think, 200 to 300 words and things like that. None of those creatures speak. And again, in Jewish mysticism or mystical type writings, speech is from your voice, and you're only able to make speech with your voice when you have breath pass over your your larynx. That's the right word, right? Yeah, your larynx, your lips, your tongue, all that stuff. Your teeth. All these things are essential. So basically, the physical structures of your throat, your mouth, or your throat and your mouth, are what makes speech varied. And if you were to look into and study, I think they call it mimetics. And I know a meme is an internet thing or whatever, but really the meme is like the smallest sound or root of a word, I think is what it is specifically, or if it also counts as sound. It's kind of like a single syllable, but it's a language thing that I don't know how I studied that or why. But the breath that comes out, the Hebrew word for breath is ruach. The Hebrew word for spirit is ruach. I think the Hebrew word for wind is also ruach. So spirit, breath, air, wind, they kind of are all intertwined. And Hebrew's a phenomenal language, so it uses words, and I'm saying this from teachings I've heard, not from my own scholarly knowledge that I've grasped of the Hebrew language, but it's supposed to be a phenomenal language, which means that it says things the way they sound. So wind blows, breath blows, air blows. These things are real, but almost untouchable and mysteriously sourced. Like you can't really tell where the wind came from. We don't really know where our breath comes from, except for there's the bellows type structure of our lungs. But where does the first breath come from? Where's the original breath come from? How does it work? I think that's probably why all those things are associated with spirit and spirituality. It's funny, I just listened to the Gospels, and I was going to say, there's the part in the Gospels where Messiah breathes on his disciples, and they receive some of his spirit. And that's another sign from, well, I say it's a Jewish source, technically, but I know lots of people would argue with me. But there's another, Jewish source confirming that spirit and breath and air and wind are, and I know air and wind is basically the same thing, are all kind of linked to each other. But anyway, so this is a long description of how those things work. And basically, Micah, my main character in Axis, he's going to be exposed to a man who has a religious background. Micah is like a, vaguely North American, nondescript, not really spiritual, not really religious individual, which seems to be a big thing. I think if more people were spiritually inclined with whatever faith they choose, the world would be a much better place, especially if they were much more spiritually inclined and they sought to perfect themselves within their faith's pathways, not to salvation necessarily, but like pathways of righteousness, whether you're Muslim, Catholic, Christian, Buddhist, Hindu, whatever, because most religions, at least most religions' texts, do not advocate openly being violent or a jerk to anybody. And again, people could argue with me on that, but that's the way I see most religions. And yes, there are sects of every religion or of many religions that are violent and aggressive and oppressive and terrible, and I wouldn't want them to be in power. But that's why I'm glad, that I'm in the United States and we have, supposed to have, well, anyway, it's a pretty secular country which has its pluses and minuses. The big plus being that people are actually free to choose which faith they wish to follow and are free to reject a faith if they want to. And I think that's a good, healthy thing. I think it, anyway, so getting too far afield. My point is, I think religion and faith is good. Micah, being a callow youth, will not really have that perspective. And there's kind of a mentor character who is spiritual and very knowledgeable. Of course, basically in line with my theology. Although I don't know how specifically I'll explain all of that in the book. But he definitely sources things from the entire Bible and is familiar with both Christian and Jewish higher teachings or higher knowledge, I would say. More than your Christmas, Easter Christian he's more knowledgeable than your Christmas and Easter Christian and more knowledgeable than your Yom Kippur and, Passover Jew. And he tries to inform Micah of these things. And so the setting of Micah's dream world, his fantasy, his delusion, is very deeply rooted in some of the mystical ideas and some of the factoids, let's call them, of the Bible that this mentor character shares with him in an attempt to awaken a spirituality within him and try to get the kid to see past himself. So I'm thinking about maybe, just maybe, Micah will start off in a mineral world and then ascend to a vegetable world and then an animal world and then a world of speech, I guess you could say, or like a more heavenly world within his fantasy. But one of the neat things I want to do is I kind of want to say that all of creation, the minerals, the plants, and the animals have been blessed with or have ascended, and they're kind of candidates to take over humanity's role. So they're all given movement and speech, and it's like a really interesting amalgam. And again, all humanity is asleep, and all of these, non-effective forces of nature and reality existence are going to awaken to a higher, to a sentience, a full sentience, and with agency and mobility and everything like that. And part of Micah's struggle is like, well, am I going to stay awake, or am I going to fall asleep with the rest of people? And him and his party, his group, his companions, kind of struggle through that. And I think 4 distinct worlds or 4 distinct layers to the world could be pretty interesting. And I don't know, will he ascend into them or from one to the next, or will he descend into them? I think that's an interesting idea to ponder. But that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ponder that. So thank you for your time. If you enjoyed this, give me a thumbs up. You can also subscribe. And once you're subscribed, you can ring the notification bell to get a little notice every time one of these comes out. Thank you for listening. Be well.